while a border can distinguish two peoples, it must not necessarily separate them. That is a fundamental reality that Canadians and Americans have been aware of for over 2 centuries. And it is the example that we would like to give across the globe through our engagement and devotion to freedom and justice.
President Obama and I are issuing a declaration on our border, but it is, of course, much more than that. It is a declaration on our relationship. Over the past nearly 200 years, our two countries have progressively developed the closest, warmest, most integrated, and most successful relationship in the world. We are partners, neighbors, allies, and most of all, we are true friends. In an age of expanding opportunities, but also of grave dangers, we share fundamental interests and values just as we face common challenges and threats. At the core of this friendship is the largest bilateral trading relationship in history. And since the signing of the Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement, a milestone in the development of the modern era of globalization, that partnership has grown spectacularly. Not only is the U.S. Canada's major export market, Canada is also America's largest export market, larger than China, larger than Mexico, larger than Japan, larger than all the countries of the European Union combined. 8 million jobs in the United States are supported by your trade with Canada. And Canada is the largest, the most secure, the most stable, and the friendliest supplier of that most vital of all America's purchases, energy. It is in both our interests to ensure that our common border remains open and efficient, but it is just as critical that it remains secure and in the hands of the vigilant and the dedicated. Just as we must continually work to ensure that inertia and bureaucratic sclerosis do not impair the legitimate flow of people, goods, and services across our border, so too we must up our game to counter those seeking new ways to harm us. And I say us, because as I have said before, a threat to the United States is a threat to Canada, to our trade, to our interests, to our values, to our common civilization. Canada has no friends among America's enemies, and America has no better friend than Canada. The declaration President Obama and I are issuing today commits our governments to find new ways to exclude terrorists and criminals who pose a threat to our peoples. It also commits us to finding ways to eliminate regulatory barriers to cross-border trade and travel, because simpler rules lead to lower costs for business and consumers and ultimately to more jobs. Shared information, joint planning, compatible procedures, and inspection technology will all be key tools. They make possible the effective risk management that will allow us to accelerate legitimate flows of people and goods between our countries while strengthening our physical security and economic competitiveness. So we commit to expanding our management of the border to the concept of a North American perimeter, not to replace or eliminate the border, but, where possible, to streamline and decongest it. There is much work to do. The declaration marks the start of this endeavor, not the end. An ambitious agenda between two countries, sovereign and able to act independently when we so choose, according to our own laws and aspirations, but always understanding this, that while a border defines two peoples, it need not divide them. That is the fundamental truth to which Canadians and Americans have borne witness for almost 2 centuries. And through our mutual devotion to freedom, democracy, and justice, at home and abroad, it is the example we seek to demonstrate for all others.
All right, we've got time for a couple of questions. Reporter.
Prime Minister, can you answer this in English and French? Canadians will be asking how much of our sovereignty and our privacy rights will be given up to have more open borders and an integrated economy. And while I have you on your feet, I want to ask you about Egypt as well, whether you feel that Mr. Mubarak should be stepping down sooner. It would help the transition. And, Mr. President, on the sovereignty issue, you're welcome to answer it. You don't have to speak in French, though.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I love French, but I'm just not very capable of speaking.
On the question of sovereignty, this declaration is not about sovereignty. We are sovereign countries who have the capacity to act as we choose to act. The question that faces us is to make sure we act in a sovereign way that serves Canada's interests. It is in Canada's interest to work with our partners in the United States to ensure that our borders are secure and ensure that we can trade and travel across them as safely and as openly as possible within the context of our different laws. And that is what we're trying to achieve here. We share security threats that are very similar on both sides of the border. We share an integrated economic space where it doesn't make sense to constantly check the same cargo over and over again. If we can do that at a perimeter, if we can decongest the border, that's what we should be doing. If we can harmonize regulations in ways that avoid unnecessary duplication and red tape for business, these are things that we need to do. So that's what this is all about. This is about the safety of Canadians, and it is about creating jobs and economic growth for the Canadian economy.
Security issues and sovereignty issues. Obviously, Canada and the United States are not going to match up perfectly on every measure with respect to how we balance security issues, privacy issues, openness issues. But we match up more than probably any country on earth. We have this border that benefits when it is open. The free flow of goods and services results in huge economic benefits for both sides. And so the goal here is to make sure that we are coordinating closely and that as we are taking steps and measures to ensure both openness and security, that we're doing so in ways that enhances the relationship as opposed to creates tensions in the relationship. And we are confident that we're going to be able to achieve that. We've already made great progress just over the last several years on various specific issues. What we're trying to do now is to look at this in a more comprehensive fashion so that it's not just border security issues, but it's a broader set of issues involved. And I have great confidence that Prime Minister Harper is going to be very protective of certain core values of Canada, just as I would be very protective of the core values of the United States, and those won't always match up perfectly. I thought I agree even more with his answer in French. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Now, what about on the border security and trade issues that we heard? We know the opposition's been quite critical of what they think this may entail. The truth is we don't really know too much about it yet, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the opposition has been criticizing this deal because they don't know what it was all about. Well, really, this is the first these are the first details we're hearing about it, and there's very little in the news release. Basically, as the Prime Minister said, this is the beginning of a process, not the end. What this is all about is the two primary concerns of these two countries. In the United States, its security has been since 9/11. That's why the border along the 49th parallel has become so thick and congested. Canada's big concern is doing business more efficiently with its #1 trade partner, and that's why Canadians want to get this border a little more open, getting people and goods flowing across it more quickly. So we have to give them something on security in hopes they will give us something on the border. The idea here is to set up more coordinated work between the two countries in terms of a North American security perimeter. In other words, anybody coming into North America, say into Toronto, goods or people would be checked there and wouldn't necessarily have to go through as much of a check when they continued on to the United States. So by enhancing perimeter security. The idea is that you can have a more fluid and open border between Canada and the U.S.
So we've been hearing some analysts say that, look, when this deal is signed, sealed, it is going to be just as big as the free trade deal that was ushered in. I mean, is that the scope of what we're looking at here?
Well, we don't really know. We know that a border working group, beyond the border working group, has been set up, people to look at how to make the border between the two countries more efficient, while ensuring that security of the continent is also looked after, and a regulatory cooperation council, which is looking at regulations that perhaps could be harmonized between the two countries as another way to facilitate trade. But we really don't know the full agenda. And how much along the way will be agreed to, and how much just won't fly, say, with the U.S. Congress. So, yeah, it has the potential to be as important for Canada and the United States as the free trade deal, but we won't know until it all comes out in the wash, until these working groups report back, and then the politicians decide what they can agree on and what they can't. You mentioned the opposition concerns. It is always about sovereignty, that somehow by harmonizing with the United States, we will give up our power to set our own laws. The Prime Minister was obviously sensitive to that. He repeatedly insisted that Canada is a sovereign country which will make its own decisions, but he said it's in Canada's interest now as a sovereign country to do everything it can to facilitate trade and security in cooperation with its American neighbor.
Okay, we'll keep watching this. CTV's Roger Smith joining us. Thanks, Roger.
Thank you.